Evening. I see the usual rabble is here. Welcome, welcome. Yes, you raise a good point actually, AJ. I do need to fix the bug tracker. I can't actually remember why it was broken now. But yeah, for some reason the guest account doesn't have access to things. I shall have a look. So, what are we doing? Where are we? Who are we? And what day is it? These are all questions I ask myself every day. So let's have a quick look at what I've been doing since Friday. I was fixing the glass here because the glass was turning invisible at certain angles, which was weird, and also the glass wasn't rendering properly with Lumen. It was going really opaque with weird shadows and reflections on it. And it turns out for some reason I was driving a metallic value through it, which I shouldn't have been. That seems to have fixed everything. I was also trying to get it to have depth, so it darkens the edges. In fact, if I change this a minute. Volumetric glass. There. You can see that that the edge of the glass is dark, as it would be if it was a real glass panel. But the problem is it makes it too dark when you're looking at it flat as well. So like from the side it's clear, and as you turn the camera it gets darker. What it's supposed to be doing is projecting depth through the glass. So obviously if you turn a glass plane side on, you can't see through it because it's what's the word, transmittance. It's getting rid of all the light, bouncing it around. Yeah, so whilst that works, it only works for anything which is roughly the same size and shape on all dimensions, because it takes the biggest length of the mesh and uses that as its depth Q. So of course on a glass plane it's a lot thinner than it is long, so its depth Q treats the thin part as the same as the length part, which means that's why it goes dark. Otherwise, that would have worked perfectly. We would have had glass that was properly dark at the edges. But, yeah. Needs more work. So as you can see, if I put back the proper texture, you lose that darkness around the edge of the glass. That's a work in progress. The other thing I did is I added more to the bridge alcoves. So I've started kind of roughing in roughly what I want them to look like. So the idea being that it wraps up and around. We'll have some lights in the ceiling. We'll greeble this bit up at the top, make that look nice. That all needs rounding off and making look nice. We'll have it as one continuous glass panel all the way across, and obviously the keyboards and things will be on there. Whatever displays will come up on there. And we'll have the usual chair tracks, which also need a bit of love, to be honest, because they're very low detail, and they kind of allude to what they do, but without any visible mechanism. So that needs fixing. Yeah, so just a detail pass. We'll put some little carpeted footrests in there. I went ahead and did the segmentation of this wooden bit around the outside, so that's now actual separate pieces as if it were real, and those bits now are properly put in. I've got an issue with surface normals, so if you look at the wood there, it kind of looks rounded because the face weighting isn't right, and you can see the same here as well. It's not a face weighted normal response. Now we can fix that, and I'll show you a bug which is driving me mad. So within Unreal, it's had the ability for a while now to sort out face-weighted normals, and as you can see immediately, that is now a flat piece of wood. So before, see, it's all rounded and horrible looking. As soon as we do face weighting, it becomes a nice, solid, properly flat bit of wood. Same here, it goes from weird looking to nice, which is how we want it. But I don't know why, but currently, if you hit accept, it will go through and it will destroy every texture assignment on that mesh. Like, what? Why is it doing that? And every time you do it, it will rejig the texture assignments again. And now they're different. I have literally no idea why it's doing that. And even worse, it literally breaks it at a fundamental level by removing texture assignments and swapping it all around on LOD0. No idea why, and the only way of fixing it is re-importing the mesh that I found anyway. Which means if I can't work out why it's doing that, I'm going to have to run these meshes through Blender before I bring them into Engine, which is going to be an absolute pain, having to save them out from SketchUp, then load them up in Blender, do the face weighting in Blender, and then save them out again. It's just more steps in the process every time I update something. So yeah, hopefully I can figure out what on earth's going on with that. These things are sent to try us, aren't they? But yeah, so that's kind of what we're going to end up with for our alcoves either side of the bridge. That, but more detailed, essentially. Thank you, Skibby. Yes, I am a massive Korn and Jonathan Davis fan. Always have been. Back in my skater days and my BMX days, Korn is pretty much all I listen to. Yes, and as Claire says, we're still on 5.6. I can't update to 5.7 yet until I've moved all of our global events across to the gameplay messaging subsystem within UE 5.7, because the plugin I'm using for the global events hasn't been updated for 5.7 and doesn't look like it's been touched in at least a year. So it'd be nice to get rid of that finally and move to a native solution. But it's just another job that I've got to get on and do. One of many, many, many jobs that I've got to get on and do. So 5.7 adds quite a lot of stuff that we're going to need. Yes, Claire, get the patch done first, of course. 5.7 is quite a bit more optimized for things like nanite and lumen, so that's good, immediate FPS increase. 5.7 also introduces nanite foliage, which we are going to need heavily once we start adding stuff to our planetary surfaces. In fact, our entire foliage system is all going to be built on nanite foliage, and 5.7 also has a speed tree equivalent. So if you've ever seen the speed tree system, basically you can do modular trees, modular plants, and it can just use an algorithm to generate a tree. It's really cool. But that's now native in Unreal 5.7, and when it comes to generating alien surfaces, obviously we want a really wide array of different foliage types, and they all need to be relevant to the planetary conditions and all that stuff. Now the nice thing about the foliage tool is that we can generate any kind of branch, stem, trunk that we want, and obviously we'll throw whatever material at that we have. That can be an infinite array, and and then it will actually physically attach every leaf to that tree. So all we need is like a catalogue of different leaf shapes and leaf designs. And again, we've got the full RGB spectrum in terms of colours, but the actual physical shape of the leaf, again, we can do procedurally. So we have completely unique leaf structure, completely unique plant structure, and all of that's native to 5.7. So we can have like every planetary surface with a genuinely unique kind of foliage, and that's really exciting. So those are probably the two biggest things that I want 5.7 for. But yeah, and that aside, it's got some animation improvements and all the usual stuff you get with an update. I think it's on 5.7.2 now as well, so we're 2 minor revisions behind on top of the major revision. But anyway, we want the Caravella because it's Sunday. Right, so on the last stream, we got to the point where the aggregators were receiving power from the battery arrays, which in turn are being charged by the reactor. So that's kind of the main input loop done. So from this point, given that that's the port and starboard aggregators, we now need to start distributing that out back down this stairwell per deck to start actually feeding these rooms with power, and make sure that we have these lights and everything all being driven by actual electrics rather than just being on by default. And in order to do that, we're going to need our cabling. Yes, Firsters, I was planning to put a build out on Friday. I can't remember why I didn't now. There was a reason for it. It wasn't working. Can't remember now. Something wasn't working. I'll have to go back and have a look. You get these weird packaging errors sometimes where, like, you'll have a struct, for example. You'll save a struct, and then now references to that struct are lost. So you try and package the game, it comes up with this struct is no longer valid. So then you have to go through and fix it. So it's something like that. Yeah, always have been. My favourite band of the moment, in fact, my favourite band for the past few years has been Avatar. Huge Avatar fan. Saw them live at Download about, wow, was it now 4 or 5 years ago? Has it really been that long? You're not wrong, Adassi, yes. The more integrated systems we add, the more things will start conflicting with one another, which is why I'm trying to keep everything as modular as possible so we can work on it in isolation without affecting something else. Because we've had more than one instance where we fix one bug and cause another. We had one like that with the chairs the other day, actually. We can't remember what it was now, but we fixed... Oh no, it was the loading and saving. So by fixing the game not saving and continuing properly, we then broke the ability for the NPCs to explore a star system. So it's like you're fixing one thing, and the fix for that thing then causes a problem for something else. So it's like this constant balancing act of making sure that the thing that you fix is only that thing and it doesn't touch anything else. Oh, pleased to hear it, Selaf. That's really cool, AJ. Yes, of course, Slipknot, another one of my favourite bands. Because Corey Taylor is awesome. I was looking at this the other day, and looking at for this ship especially, the rationale of so much being dependent on the battery arrays when those battery arrays are right up against the outer hull the way they are. I mean, they can't really be anywhere else. So obviously that's the outer hull there, and they are right up against it. And yeah, it is suboptimal to have them up there, but there is nowhere else because you've got the shuttle bay underneath and then a cargo hold. So they're kind of stuck where they are. So I was wondering whether or not we have a siphon system instead, whereby the ship systems are all powered by the reactor, but at the same time the reactor is charging the batteries. So at times when the reactor is off or the reactor is running on idle, then the ship is then powered by the batteries. So under normal operation, there's going to be a lot of power left over from the reactor. So there's no reason not to just siphon that off to power the ship, rather than constantly draining the batteries. But we'll have a look at that and see what impact that has gameplay wise. I think the main thing with the electrical side and sort of the engineering gameplay is that, you know, absolutely we don't want the reactor up to 100% the whole time. It should only ever be turned up to 100% when you're using the FTL drive or you're using the weapons and shields and things. There should be no reason to have the reactor turned up that high normally, because you're just burning fuel at that point, and venting that plasma into space. So we want to make it so that as soon as you shut down the FTL drive, that reactor is immediately then venting all that plasma out of the ship, until you turn that reactor down to the point where it's equalized with your current draw. Again, it's a zero-sum game, that the energy has to go somewhere. So from an engineering perspective, and especially if you're an engineer on the bridge, you're going to be turning the reactor up and down all the time, depending on the needs of the ship. So that's going to be a constant balancing act to make sure that you're only generating the power you need. We could, of course, automate that, but that takes away a job. And there's a lot we could automate, but then again, it takes away jobs, it takes away player agency, which we don't want. So it could be the case that when you go to FTL, like 100% of the reactor is needed. Like absolutely every single last like kilowatt of energy is going straight into the FTL drive, at which point the batteries are needed to power the ship. So whilst you're at FTL, the ship's battery powered. As soon as you drop out of FTL, the ship can then run off the reactor again, because the reactor is then free to power the ship. I think that's probably the best middle ground solution to handle that, but we just need to make sure that the power infrastructure is such that we have that managed, because we'll need some kind of, I guess we'll need to use the aggregators as our main power distribution. So on here we've got the input from the battery arrays, but we'll also need one from the reactor too. So the reactor will be a third feed in this case on here, so that will auto switch to whichever one currently has, well, it will load balance, to be fair. So we can maybe automate that in this box, so that if there's voltage coming in from the reactor, then it will prioritize that over the batteries. So it will stop drawing from the batteries if the reactor has the voltage there. In fact, if we use slightly more voltage from the reactor, then we can have it prioritized based on where the highest voltage is. And that means we're only having to run 2 extra cables rather than 1 cable per distribution box on here, which would just cut down the wiring impact a little bit. Which means we would then definitely need probably direct from there. I'm just thinking we could piggyback it on this box. Probably won't though, because this box is specifically for controlling the battery charge voltage for the 4 battery arrays. I think having the backup, or having the reactor main feed running through there as well, would be like dual purposing this box, and I'm not a fan of dual purposing it. I'd rather have a separate physical run going to the aggregators from there. Which I'll probably run up this side, because we've got four where are we? Higher voltage ones that side. So we could do with a kind of mirrored higher voltage one this side. Yeah. I'll do that. Yes, we could make it an auto button, I suppose. I guess, you know, if there's an NPC sat at the engineering station, they would be doing that anyway. So we can, yeah, if we build an auto button, then we'll just use that same functionality when the NPC sat there, so they can use the same system. Do you mean the music on the stream, Don? Is it loud? I can turn it down if it's too loud. Ground, yeah, it's an awkward one, isn't it? Because like on a spaceship there is no ground, so yeah, it would have to be the metalwork of the ship. I mean, there's a lot of it, so it's the only thing we have. Yeah, Minecraft dirt block, that'll do. Yeah, why not, Lizard? Why not? Ugh, I shudder to think. Probably the worst episode in all of Voyager. But we'll be going much quicker than that. Yeah, I don't know how submarines do it. I mean, you'd think that the ocean would be one giant Earth, wouldn't you? Okay, Don, makes sense. Well, good luck to her. Yeah, I've got quite a soft spot for Voyager, to be honest. I think Robert Picardo kind of makes the series in some ways, and I wish they had less holodeck episodes. But yeah, I think overall I like the concept of Voyager. I like the idea of them just trying to get home and encountering new species along the way and getting into trouble along the way. It's a lot more purposeful than some of the other seasons. So yeah, I guess it's why I like Stargate Universe as well. It's kind of a similar thing, isn't it? All stuck on one ship trying to get somewhere. Yeah, me too, AJ. Yeah, I tend when I rewatch the likes of TNG or whatever, I find myself cherry picking now. I mean, I've seen them all so many times now. I guess they get a bit samey after a while, but yeah, I do tend to just cherry pick them. Right, let's, I guess, do this deck by deck. Oh god, no, the Janeway and Da Vinci ones, they were they're all right actually. They weren't terrible, to be fair, but still a little on the old cringe side. Yes, there will be many shuttlecraft. In fact, here is kind of the size and shape for one. Obviously, that's just a size guide. That's not what they're going to look like. But yes, in this particular ship, we can probably fit 2. But we'll have lots of different small craft with lots of different purposes. Like we'll have, at least on the Magellan, we'll have like a little mining vessel that you can take out. Little work bee type things for repairing bits and pieces on the hull, that sort of thing. Yeah, and we'll have things that range from troop transports to things which can hold vehicles. Like this one is designed to be big enough to hold like some kind of ground vehicle. So it will have like a little garage section in the back where you can drive a vehicle in, and then some just some crew seating up the front. So this would be an example of one of the bigger ones. But what we're going to do is we're going to build up some size classes. So the trunk section of a shuttle needs to have various size classes supported, and then we'll have size classes of vehicle. So we'll have basically a bounding box cuboid for that size class, and any vehicle we make within that size class is going to have to fit within that bounding box to make sure it fits in the relevant shuttle sizes. So the different shuttle classes will refer to, I guess, their capacity in terms of what they can have on board. Yeah, and this ship in particular is one of the smaller ones. So this will have a crew of 14 to 20, maybe. We've moved on to the idea of double bunking them. This was supposed to be like a small 5-man vessel, and then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Because when you're designing a ship, obviously you need all the rooms you need to fit the mission profile. And as we went through the mission profile and worked out the kind of things we're going to need for crew support, the things we're going to need for doing science, the engineering side of things. The ship just got bigger and bigger and bigger because we just needed to fit all that stuff in. So so I will try again to make a small 5-man vessel, and we'll see whether I can achieve it, and also have it fit all the stuff that we need. It's going to have to be very compact in the inside, I think. But that's what I like about this. I love that the act of designing and building a starship makes you, I guess, realize how big they need to be in order to be able to do what they need to do. This is physically as small as we can make it to fit its mission profile, and even this is a little bit too small. We're still running into space problems with this one because every time we think, oh yeah, like we need a conference room, it's like, where do you put the conference room? We've got no room for it. So yeah, it's a fun challenge. Yeah, I find it easier to plan things in 3D. I guess my head works in 3D more. I like just roughing it out, drawing some corridors, drawing some rooms, sticking a person in there for scale, and But anyway, let's start making some boxes. I guess if we start, I guess we'll start with deck 1, because you've got, actually, yeah, if we do the bridge one first. Yeah, we will actually. Let's do the bridge one first, because then we can get the bridge hardware all powered up using the actual proper electrical supply. I'm stuck in an engine. There we go. Which means that we shall move that up there. Make sure this is fitting within the hull. So we want that to be roughly around there-ish. Which means we don't need that. Handy. It will be moddable to an extent. So right now, for example, you can already do things like add some custom star systems to the game. So I guess that's the first moddable thing we've added. It's just that ability to change the physical shape of the galaxy, to add in your own custom systems, and if you wanted to do something which was more in line with a certain IP that you might be interested in, then you could add those star systems and those worlds from whatever IP that might be, and make yourself a sandbox in that environment. Or you could just come up with your own story, I guess, your own set of alien races. But yes, so that'll be the first way that you can mod the game. The ships themselves, as you can no doubt see, are made of many different pieces, and they're genuinely bits of complex machinery. So this isn't just a static mesh that you can throw together in Blender and import it into the game, because it's made of literally thousands of individual pieces. So you could probably swap out individual meshes. I've designed the corridor sections like this to be generally square and rectangular, but when you actually let's find a corridor here, like this one is kind of adhering to the rectangular shape somewhat, but it doesn't need to. So as much as the background framework is square in shape, none of these panels need to be. So what you could potentially do is mod that mesh to have a completely different interior styling in the corridors, and have it generally still all work the same. So you're not touching any of the cabling or the physical shape of the ship, but you are modifying the interior look and feel of the ship. Like you could have different flooring, different walls, different ceilings. As long as those meshes had the same texture groups and things, for things like the lights, I'm sure that would work. But modding the ships is going to be a monumental task. So we'll probably approach that by way of, at some point, having a modular shipbuilding system, just like Starfield or No Man's Sky, where you have prefabricated blocks and then you just join those blocks together, kind of Lego style, to kit bash a vessel in that way. I'm quite excited about the idea of doing something like that. I love the idea of just building all these Lego blocks and being able to cobble them together. But again, with everything being fully simulated, with all these cables and things, they all need to physically touch in order to link together and transmit power. So with any kind of prefabricated solution, those things need to connect end to end. So we need to think about endpoints and connectivity, and yeah, it's not going to be easy, but I'm sure we'll give it a go. As if, Delta, as if. Okay, so if we grab that, of course they are in separate groups, so that's going to make my life awkward. Put that one there, and on this side we will grab that one out. Don't think we're actually going to need this one, to be fair, because oh yes we will. Yes, we will need that one because we've got our backup bridge connection. So the bridge will be powered by both sides of the ship. So again, electrically, the port and starboard sides have entirely isolated feeds. So if one side of the ship is without power, the other side won't be. And then we can find some way of bridging it across and getting the other side up and running again. Ah. I have actually tried it now. I installed Starfield. I think it was either just before Christmas or during Christmas, just to give it a whirl. And I don't know. I think it's pretty. I'll give it that. But I don't know. I can't think of it as a space game. It's not a space game in the sense that that this or Elite or Star Citizen are space games. It's an RPG set in space. I think that's what it is, and if that's what it's designed to be, then it's doing its job. The first thing I did in Starfield is, oh yes, very much on it. Everything you see here is a placeholder. Like, none of this is final in the slightest. This is all grey boxing. This is all us grey boxing the ship, making sure that everything is the right scale, making sure all the cabling lines up where it needs to line up, and then once we're happy with it, we'll then go and actually model it properly and make it all sexy looking. But yeah, absolutely. Having a naked starship that only shows the physical infrastructure, I think it's one of the coolest things ever. I get really geeky about that. So yeah, we'll be doing more of this for sure. But yeah, with Starfield, I played it for like an hour, and then just kind of got bored of the main storyline, and just went off wandering across a planet. And yeah, I guess you get to feel the procedural generation quite quickly, and the sameness of it is quite apparent. And I guess that's something which is the biggest problem with procedural generation, is having it be too repetitive. And that's something that I absolutely want to address for our game, is dealing with that repetitiveness with the procedural generation, and try and add some variety and variation at a local scale. So as you're going across a planet's surface, it's not the same plant over and over and over for the entire planetary surface, or the same type of terrain for the whole surface. Like, if you explore the surface of Earth, you'll find things in Australia that you don't find in Europe, and the things in South America that you don't find in North America. That geology and flora and fauna, it's all completely different across the globe. So I want to kind of really lean into that and make sure our system is just as varied. And we'll probably drive our seed system based off of the X and Y location on the planet. So we'll use the vector for the surface location to tweak the seeds for that world. So we'll have a base seed which drives the base stats for things, and then as you move across the planet, those seeds will drift, which will give you slight variations on stuff as you go around. So hopefully that will make it feel a bit more organic. But yeah, I ended up just like shooting up some big station with a dish on top of it, and yeah, I didn't like how bullet spongy it was either. Like, if I shoot someone in the head, I expect them to fall down, not just keep shooting back at me. So that's something else we'll address for this. We'll our ground combat in this game, I guess it's going to be fairly swift. We won't have personal shields. There'll be no bullet sponginess. There'll be no armor. If you shoot someone, they will fall down, and the same is true the other way around. If they shoot you, you will fall down. So it's going to be a bit more realistic in that way. Exactly, Firstus. Yeah. There's yeah, being shot should be a bad thing. So I'm just never a fan of games where you're just like unloading entire magazines into people and they're still standing there. It just, I don't know, it just feels a bit too arcadey. Well, initially, there is no economy structure within the game because it's not that kind of game. This isn't going to be a trading game in that regard. That said, our third expansion is going to have lots of trading. We're going to be running a space shipping company essentially, and in terms of Earth and the Sol system, the world under the new UN has moved to just a credit system. So rather than being a named currency, it's just referred to as credits. So all of the nations of Earth still have their own currencies where they've chosen to keep them. So like England will still have the pound because we're obstinate and stubborn. So we'll still have pound sterling in the UK, but that will have an exchange rate with the global currency. So the currency of commerce is the credit, and the currency of commerce for the whole Sol system is the credit. And then individual nations will have their individual exchange rates for credits. So when you're running your space shipping company, you'll be dealing in credits. Now the interesting thing is how do we express that with other worlds? And I like the idea of having entirely different currencies for different star systems. So you might be really, really rich in one star system, but penniless in another because the currency that they use in one star system is worthless to another one. Things like gold is probably not going to be precious anymore. Once you leave the confines of Earth, reserves for things like precious metals are huge throughout the galaxy. So they're not going to be difficult to find, therefore they're going to lose their value. So we'll probably find some other thing as a reserve currency, I guess. So in Star Trek they use latinum, don't they? That's their valuable thing, or dilithium. We need something like that, which is universally valued, and then everything has its value balanced against that thing. We just need to work out what that thing is. But yeah, so as far as humans are concerned, they trade in credits. And I like the idea that on the ship, and we can track this on the UIs and things on the ship, is we'll have, as we move around the galaxy, if we choose to trade with an alien race, then we'll start building up a currency reserve in their currency, which means that you can build up wealth with that one species, and then we'll have like some kind of vault on the ship where you'll have lots and lots of different currencies stored for different species, which could be interesting. We'll have a look at that. But yeah, certainly in the first couple of expansions, there'll be no need for currency or money because you're out exploring, you're out doing the science job, you're not out there trading. Yeah, I'm sure there's some rare mineral, like the mineral we're going to use for the FTL drive and the gravity generator. We have the math for how much energy you need to create virtual mass for things like condensing, contracting space. So if we were using just the raw math with known science, then you need a tremendous amount of energy to create mass. Obviously, mass and energy are interchangeable, so you convert that energy into mass, and that mass then condenses space or creates gravity, because that's just, you know, science as we know it. So the rare mineral that we're going to use does something at a quantum level to create a lot more virtual mass for the energy that you put into it. Or rather, it doesn't create more mass, it just has more of an effect in terms of compressing space and, you know, creating gravity. So this is like this magic mineral that we've got, which basically it doesn't break E equals mc squared, but it has like a side effect which causes the compression of space. So it's not actually generating more virtual mass, it's just compressing space more than it ordinarily would do. So something like that. So that mineral that we're using would be very valuable throughout the galaxy, because it's the thing that makes FTL possible, it's the thing that makes artificial gravity possible, it's kind of like the plot device that we need. Funnily enough, I don't actually know what dilithium does. I thought dilithium was needed to control the matter-antimatter reaction. Although beyond that, I don't know. I have no idea what it does. Ah, right, okay. But yeah, I imagine once we start mining asteroids, gold is going to be a meaningless commodity. My second UE Windows just like made itself really tiny. Now I can't move it. Oof! It's just got like. Sometimes you got to move it and it just collapses like this to like this tiny little thing. Why does it do that? I suppose we'll give them some collisions, why not? So again, right now, all of our cables are just using the world origin for positioning. We haven't set up the snapping system for them yet, so they will well, they also won't be one giant piece either. Once we do it properly, they'll be segmented. But for now, we'll just stick with one giant piece so that we can test our connectivity. So that's the port cable coming in there. Let's get rid of YouTube there. So we'll stick our bridge distributor on there, and then we'll need power and lighting coming off of that. And I guess we'll put the A deck general distributor out here somewhere. So we'll have the bridge on its own, completely separate feed. Unlike the Magellan, where the ADEC feed is on the bridge, we'll just have that around here somewhere. This particular area is still slightly unknown. We definitely want science labs in this space. But we also need room for a conference room. I may put the conference room in the middle, or maybe offset it to one side. Have a corridor down this side here, and then have the labs at the back. But for a vessel which is dedicated to science, we've got very little in the way of lab space. So might need to make some adjustments there. We wouldn't sell ship pieces as such. We do, I guess, like a look and feel thing instead. So, like, off the top of my head, like a cyberpunk version of the full suite of bricks. So let's say we've got 50, 60 different bricks that you can put together to make ships. We wouldn't like sell individual new brick pieces unless they were as substantial in some way. Like I don't like charging for stuff that is just throwaway cosmetic content. But if it was like a total conversion where we take like all 50, 60 bricks and do like a steampunk version of all 50 and 60 of them, then yeah, then we'd sell that as like the steampunk kit and then like a cyberpunk kit and do it that way. And then any new brick that we add in the future, we would have to add to every pack that we have. So they'd constantly being updated as well. Yeah, more like theming packs. Because from a moral standpoint, in terms of charging for it, obviously a lot of work has to go into recreating every single piece in that new theme. So modeling work is needed for all of them. Therefore, that's justifying the cost of charging for it because there's a lot of work involved. I listen sometimes. Stealing that one. Nice thing of having made these unified actors now is that we can just reuse the same box and just change the number of ins and outs on it. Yeah, they won't be like from the Caravella or the Magellan. They will be dedicated bricks built for that purpose, and we'd also have to have like a base chassis. So we would have for every, I guess if for every ship class, it will have a base chassis which will contain the reactor, the storage tanks and everything. And that would be like a self-contained power plant for that ship. And then you would bolt the pieces onto that. So I guess from a simulation side of things, we need to make sure that the fundamentals are always working and always laid out properly. So by having set chassis, we can basically provide you with the framework, which you then bolt all the pieces onto to make whatever custom starship you want. But the core of each ship will have a set base structure, and then we'll have lots of different size classes, from like teeny weeny ones all the way up to huge cruisers. So you would pick your size class first, have that base chassis, which is just like a bare framework with a big reactor in the middle of it. And then you'd be bolting bits onto that depending on what rooms you want and how many engines you want on the back, and that sort of thing. And because we have power per cubic centimeter of plasma as our volume of energy, then obviously the size of the reactor determines like how many engines you can have realistically and that sort of thing. Maybe, yes. I've mentioned custom shipbuilding many times to Claire, and she's always sure to make me state that this is very much a future plan thing, not a now thing. No idea, to be honest. I mean, as many as possible, I suppose, is the easy answer, but I guess we want a meaningful selection of ship classes. So I say classes, more size really, because the class of the vessel really depends on what rooms you'd put on it. If you filled it full of bunks and guns, then it's some kind of military vessel. If you filled it full of cargo holds, then it's a trading ship. But both the trading ship and the military vessel would have the same chassis in the core. It's just what you bolt onto that which changes, the purpose of the vessel. Right, so that's technically plugged in. So that cable there should have power. Let's just add the end bit because that's not connecting. Yeah, so the UN space fleet is, I guess it's an all-in-one organization, but not unlike the current UN. So obviously the UN has the UN Security Council and it has the UN Science Advisory Board. So you have two different departments, as it were, within the overall UN. So the president of the UN has authority over all the different branches of the UN, but the military branch and the science branch are two separate branches. And the same will be true for the new UN in our game, where the military branch of the UN is just like the peacekeeping force, whereas the science vessels are an entirely different branch of that organization. They are all part of the UN, but very much managed individually. So the Magellan class is predominantly civilian. So all the scientists are non-serving military personnel, and they're all UN scientists that are working aboard that vessel. The very few military that are on there are going to be the security team, maybe some of the engineers, the command crew, but that's it. Like the head of science will have an honorary military rank whilst they're serving, but ultimately they're still a civilian. Yeah, this particular ship is a corporate vessel, so this isn't part of the UN at all. This one is privately owned and ran by a shipbuilding corporation called Lunara Industries, and their thing is that they were one of the contractors on the Magellan, and through corporate espionage they've got some of the plans for the Magellan's FTL drive, and they've retrofitted one of their ships with a Magellan FTL drive, a much smaller version of it. And the idea is that they're sending that out to basically find new tech that they can exploit to build better ships and make more money. That's kind of their thing. So that's the point of this ship. That's what this is for. That's its mission profile. Get out there and exploit stuff. Exactly that. Yes, sorry, Nonny. Yeah, so the position of head of science will have a rank associated with it, but that individual is a civilian. Yeah, I don't think the Science Advisory Board has a single leader. It's an advisory board. It's more like a council. So it'll be multiple people that kind of vote on things. Yeah, maybe. I don't like building ugly ships, but I'm sure we'll get some. Yeah, there will be space battles. Things will get blown up. Things will get shot at. It has guns for a reason. Again, placeholder. So that's that one. Should be powered now, so let's grab the end of it. Actually, we will have these come in the top. So 2 inputs, and we need to connect this one to that. So output interface needs to come over here. Actually, if I grab world location of that, and we can cheat a little bit. And pop. Right, that's them two connected. And then at the other end, same with this one. Though I need to move. Yeah, I need to move the inputs to the top and have the outputs on the side. Thank you, EJ. Appreciate it. Generally speaking. So in the lore of the game, humans haven't expanded beyond Sol. We'll have some kind of science thing going on in Alpha Centauri. So we might have a science station in Alpha Centauri, but that's as far as we've really got in terms of infrastructure. The Magellan is literally a prototype. Up until then, all FTL ships were barely FTL, if at all. So whilst we could reach Alpha Centauri, maybe within a few months, it wasn't practical for deep space exploration. They just weren't quick enough. The idea with the Magellan class is a breakthrough in material science made it possible to build a ship which can literally explore the whole galaxy. So we're literally on the cusp of humans stepping out beyond Sol for the first time. So there aren't any human colonies out there. We haven't explored the galaxy at all yet in the game's lore. As we build the expansions and do the single player campaigns and things, then we'll be expanding the story. We'll be meeting other alien races, forming alliances, getting into conflicts, that sort of thing. And then humanity will begin exploring and begin expanding throughout the course of the story. So by the time you get to the third or fourth expansions, there will be a lot more in terms of human colonies. In fact, the third expansion, the one where you're running your own space shipping company, the idea behind that is there will be lots of human settlements that are being established kind of around the Sol system, and as part of your job as a space shipping company, you will be sending them resources and machinery and such. That's the trade routes that you'll be establishing. And we want it so that the ones that you choose to trade with are the ones that are developing more quickly. So you can have a real effect on the development of that settlement by supplying them with the things they need. Oh yeah, within the Sol system, there will be settlements, just not outside. But then, the game is only set 200 or so years in the future, and you need to kind of think about how much is humanity genuinely going to get done in the next 200 years, and I would wager not a lot. Yeah, I definitely wanted kind of near future technology rather than something that's so far in the future as to be just pure sci-fi. Well, yeah, virtually, yeah, for sure. Okay, so one of them's working. Oh, okay, so that one's giving voltage. That one is not. Now it is. So that must be set to off by default. Hang on, let's check the bridge a minute. Oh yeah, I forgot they randomly break over time. Right, so we have power. Good. Need to work out why the UI is not coming on. Okay, yep, so just setting the initial startup state. So 1 and 2 need to be enabled, so that's lighting and hardware. And we've got our A and B, which are our port and starboard feeds coming in. So that's the input voltage, and then these two would be the output voltage, which needs to supply the ship itself, or supply the bridge. So we need 2 power cables coming out of there. One will bring up the ceiling, I expect. Have it go across there. And then the other one, I imagine we'll just run around the base of the bridge. And then all the devices will have their own drop cables which go and connect to that. So where we have the floor panels that can be pulled up, we'll have, like for the holo display, we'll have a cable which is dropping down and running underneath. Yes, it's tempting to give it its own feed because it's supposed to be like a super high voltage thing, which is why they're not kind of ubiquitous all over the ship. We want our hologram technology to be still new, and it's like a fledgling technology. So whilst we have hologram technology within the game or within the human race, it hasn't been miniaturized yet. It's not something that, like, you wouldn't have it in people's homes yet, unless you're dealing with like a millionaire's mansion. They might have their own suite, but it's not something that the general person would have in their home. It's kind of high voltage, it's big, it requires a lot of computing power. But over the course of the game and the history, we will obviously meet alien races, we'll trade with them, they'll get some of their tech, and then we can start miniaturizing some of this technology as we meet and trade with alien races. That's why I want to start the game so close to the present day, so that again we're not dealing with technology which is too far in our future, because it gives us plenty of upgrade potential. The ship's heating will be electrical, so the HVAC, which pumps air around the ship, the individual vents will have heating and cooling elements in them. So on a per room basis, you can tweak the temperature of the room. So it's either going to be doing air conditioning or heating using blown air. So I guess the basic air that gets blown around the ship will be at room temperature, and then you just tweak it up or down depending on your preference on a per room basis. Right, so we need our lighting and power. So we'll do the lights in the bridge as our first connected devices. So again, right now, the way they work is they expect to be told which cable they're connected to. And you could specify any cable anywhere on the ship and it would just magically work, because it works by ID. We want to move away from that and have physical connectivity, which means every single light needs a physical connector, which then overlaps with a cable connector on the cable itself. So we will have multiple segments of cable, each of which will have a connector on them, like a plug socket, basically, just like a breakout box that these will all connect into. So I guess we need, in order for that to work, I'm probably going to have to export some separate isolated meshes. This is where it gets to the nitty-gritty complicated bit, because we need to work out, like, for however many devices we have on the bridge, we then need to work out, like, where does that physical connectivity run to? Where do we put our plug board? So if our main junction box is there, I imagine we might run it along either floor plating or through the wall, and maybe have like a plug board here or something that they're all connected into. Or we have it under the floor. So we'd have a multiple power outs on here. We have a cable dropping down under the floor, and then maybe like here or somewhere we'd have what is essentially a gang socket under the floor that all this stuff's connected into. Although again, for the holo display, I think we'll give that its own feed, so we can power that separately. And we'll need to do a similar thing on the Magellan as well. Start powering that on its own, given that it's a high voltage system, which means that the voltage we're outputting into here might need to be higher voltage for those types of systems. Yeah, so I think what we'll do is we'll probably make the distribution box maybe a kilovolt. I'll see. It depends. I guess it depends on the amperages, because if the holo display, I mean, a typical kettle's what, a kilowatt, isn't it? So if this was, say, 10 kilowatts in terms of its power draw, then we need to have a look at what kind of amperage that would be on a 240 volt feed. And if the amperage is going too high, or as it's creeping up too high, then start upping the voltage of the cable in order to keep that amperage in check. Yeah, I agree, Timmy. Yeah, it's safer to run it through the floor ultimately. Although we'll run the holo display through the ceiling because the projector is going to be in the ceiling. We just need to make sure the player can get to it. Obviously, if that cable's damaged, it needs to be fixed. So we need to make sure there's enough of it exposed that can be reached. Because we'll just have that as one length of cable. But you probably can't get to it in the ceiling, so we'll do it from here. Yeah, the voltage triangle. Right, let's do exactly that, shall we? So if we... Actually, we don't have a holo display yet, do we? Yeah, let's bring our bridge bits in a minute. Yeah, so we'll have a circle of projectors around there, which are projecting the holo display. And I think we might need to raise this ceiling. I'll see how I mean, we can maybe add just a small raised section in that circular bit there, but I'm just worried that the holo display is going to be too small to use. Like, obviously we need to scale it down much smaller than the Magellan one, but if it's too small, then it's not going to be usable. So we just need to bear that in mind. So we could also, rather than having the chairs up against it like we do here, we could potentially set those consoles back a bit. So make that circular, embed it into the floor. Yeah, and then set these back a bit maybe, just so there's still room to walk around it. We could also put them at a diagonal maybe. Or to be honest, we could have forward-facing consoles either side there. There will definitely be bus bars, but generally speaking, the bus bars are going to be inside these boxes. At some point, you will be able to open these boxes up, because as much as we have breakers that can go and everything, at the moment it's all handled via just a touchscreen UI. If a breaker actually blows properly, we want to be able to open the box and actually see the physical breaker connected to the bus bar, so that you can pull it out and replace it with a new one. So putting subcomponents within these boxes is very much something we want to do. Yeah, and then whether or not this goes up through the ceiling or through the floor, I guess it's going to depend entirely on whether or not we're having a ceiling mounted projector, or whether we do it in the floor, because we could make that unit an actual projector, which in some ways is more tempting. Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, Timmy. I think having these chairs moved kind of more like that, with consoles that are kind of diagonally facing like that, but still ultimately facing the holo display. Maybe move them back a bit. Then we can make that circular, have it more floor mounted, make the holo display itself bigger, and then have a small dome, I think, above the bridge there, just to give us a bit more headroom for the sphere that would be the holo display. Yeah, our ships don't really have like main screens like Star Trek ships do. We've got like tactical and navigational overlays. So these, all these are smart glass. And the idea is it kind of knows where you are, and the computer's updating it to kind of make it look 3D. But ultimately, they're just smart glass. And when you look through the glass, you're seeing what is essentially a HUD. But it's not a view screen in the Star Trek sense. That's all going to be handled from here. So if you're making a comms call, you will have a floating 2D screen that's being projected by the holo display. The holo display is the main viewer, essentially, and will do all the stuff that the main viewer would ordinarily do. But yes, I like the idea of this, of having diagonally facing seats. So we'll offset those consoles diagonally. Yeah, and I think probably I like the idea of building the conference room like into the bridge. At least like a tactical table of some kind. Just some area at the back of the bridge here where you can just sit and chat rather than having to be sat in those chairs, which opens up more room here for the actual science activity. And then we'll do some engineering stuff over on this side. So we've got that whole multi-role approach to this bridge, because we've got the helm, probably the same as the Magellan in terms of the helm duties, but the science guy would also be the comms guy as well. So there'll definitely be like a dual role station there. The tactical guy would also be doing the defense stuff as well. Again, dual rolling. So there's not as many people on the bridge as you'd have on the Magellan. Probably just a single engineering console. And probably not needing environmental control, because I'll probably just have that on the wall. We wouldn't need an internal security station, I wouldn't have thought. Again, because the ship is so small, we don't need the same kind of infrastructure that the Magellan has. Could do, but I think the captain would get twitchy about people putting coffee on it. I know I would. No putting coffee on the holo display. It does not react well. Has the stream stopped? No, come back. Okay, never mind. Yeah, this is not a combat vessel. This is literally a scout ship. So it's supposed to be fast, maneuverable, and generally able to get itself out of trouble if need be. Obviously, it is armed. So it's not entirely defenseless, but it's more defensive in nature. Yeah, so we could have a floor-mounted thing like that. Actually, what segment's this? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, Timmy, which is what this would be. So we'd have the projectors would be embedded in this ring around here. So we turn that into a piece of hardware. then we'd have command console there, like we do on the Magellan. I guess what we don't want to do is we don't want to make the helm guy like too far away from everyone again. Like one of my biggest issues on the Magellan is how far away the helm is from the command chair. Like you're really having to like holler across to the helm person. But by having a central holo display like this, it's kind of unavoidable really. I guess it depends on how close we want them to sit. Like the closer to the front you are, the better view you have, but I guess that's not a terrible view. We'll probably raise them up a bit so they're a bit more visibility around. Can't really go any more than that though. Oh, I really need to sort that edge out. Look at that, it's terrible. Shoddy modelling. Okay, so yeah, in terms of the holo display, we'll remove that beam across there, dome that up a little bit. In fact, I might continue that circle. In fact, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do exactly that. So we'll connect that through there, stick it in the middle a little bit. Yeah, so if we do something like that in terms of the framework, then we can make a small dome on the bridge ceiling, and that will cater for making the holo display larger because it can then go up into the ceiling. To be honest, we could even make it a window. Just have a window there above the holo display, might look a bit nice. The gravity on the ship is generated by underfloor nets, so they're essentially field generators, and they use the same general principle as the FTL drive, where we are using mass energy equivalents to generate the virtual mass required to either compress space in the sense of the FTL drive, or create enough virtual mass to cause gravity in the sense of the gravity generators. So it's going to be very, very localized. Each floor panel will have its own isolated coil, basically, and when that coil is energized, it uses that same magic mineral to basically generate gravity. So when you're on that particular panel, you're experiencing 1G. There'll be some overlap. It'll have an inverse square fall off. But if you were to lose an entire corridor's worth of paneling, then that corridor would have no gravity. Beyond whatever's leaking from nearby corridors. But yes, it will be a high voltage system for sure. Probably, of all the things on the ship, that's probably the most sci-fi of all the things. Because the amount of energy you would need would be exceptionally high. So having just an isolated coil underneath each floor panel, like the arcing distance on that alone would make it unusable. It would be a ridiculous amount of energy you'd have to put into it, but we're hand waving that part for the sci-fi. Yeah, well, the gravity would be generated in 360 degrees, so there's that. But we'll have to have some kind of plate under it, which kind of nullifies or significantly reduces the effect, like a monopole magnet almost. Floor of the sci-fi, yeah. I guess it's a monopole gravity generator. Again, some hand wavy stuff going on there. Like, monopole magnets are fascinating, because if we could solve monopole magnets, then we'd have infinite energy, because you could make things that just spin forever. It's like those things that just break general relativity, but yeah. So for that reason, monopole magnets are impossible. But in the same way, monopole gravity generation is impossible, but we'll do it by way of some kind of clever plating. It bounces the gravity off back up again or something. Yeah, we'll just walk on the ceiling. That works too. Alright, I need to export this a minute. Segment 4. There we go. Yeah, so we'll organize everything on the bridge around this point. So it's giving us a lot more room now for a larger hollow display. In fact, let's make that larger. Yeah, see, this is where it gets awkward, because it's like talking to the helm guy, kind of leaning around the planet, like, hello. But it is what it is. Yeah, the floor is a hoover. That's it. Just constantly sucking you down. Okay, so in that case then, so if we're doing that there, and we're doing it from the floor, which does seem to make more sense in this instance, then we will have the power for that routed through the floor. I guess we've got those consoles there, so we'll have it offset and through that way, which means we'll need to drop cables down there. So on that note, let's turn off that a minute. So we don't have much in the way of cavity. If I just draw a random rectangle a minute. I'll extrude that out to there, give it some thickness, put it down a bit. Yeah, so that the floor cavities are not huge. Probably not much more than that overall. And we can make them deeper, but the deeper we make them, the more we are intruding upon the interdeck spacing. So that is, in the grand scheme of things, that's the thickness of the between deck space, which is 0.5 meter. So depending on need, we could drop that down maybe an additional 10. But then we've basically used up half of the available space between the decks, and this is where we're routing things like the HVAC conduit. So we need to be careful with just how much we're using up that cavity, but we'll run the cables through there, and also the gravity generating coils as well, so they'd also need to go through there. Yeah, unless we have that maybe built into the floor paneling. Yeah, we made this space much fatter on the Magellan. The Magellan has an entire meter of usable space between decks. Big enough that you could crawl through it if you needed to. But with, walls and infrastructure and everything, it's still not a huge amount of space. I'm just thinking in terms of how we're representing the actual gravity generation hardware. Like, if we build it into the actual floor panels, then they could be the thing that gets replaced. So if you've got a damaged and destroyed floor panel, then it's also no longer generating gravity. So as we could look at it like that. And if we have it so that each panel essentially connects to the next in a series, so we have set points where energy is put into them, and then that energy just flows through whatever material is we're using to generate the field within the actual plate itself. It's not a pleasant idea thinking about the amount of energy that would be running under your feet, but there's very little other ways we can handle the gravity generation on the ship. Because gravity pulls down, and obviously gravity would be a 360 degree field. So the original idea on the Magellan is that the gravity generator would be on the belly of the ship. So the entire belly of the vessel would be a crisscross of field generators. So below the ship would have 1g of gravity going up, and then the whole rest of the ship would have 1g of gravity coming down. But then we added a keel fin underneath, which means gravity would then be upside down in the keel fin, which isn't ideal. So, and the other problem with that is that if you've got something the size of the Magellan generating a 1g gravity field ship-wide, then anything like a shuttle flying near it is going to fall down towards the ship. And like if you were to park the Magellan next to a space station, which presumably would be doing the same thing, then you've got these two massive gravity wells parked next to each other, which are, of course, just going to drift towards each other, ending in catastrophe. So, yeah, so doing it in the floor in a localized way seems the safest in terms of gravity bleeding out where you don't want it. But yeah, it's going to have to be a sci-fi hand waving. There's no easy way around that. It's just going to have to be a thing. I don't really want to go down the road of having, like, I guess like if you picture Star Citizen ships, they've all got like a gravity generator. They've got like a spinny ball thing, and then that spinny ball is magically just giving the ship gravity. Which is fine from a sci-fi perspective, but I want something a bit more mechanical than that, a bit more explainable than that, other than magic spinny ball makes gravity. But if we have the floor plating be energizable, then I suppose that works. Or we have, I suppose we could do something like, rather than running all the voltage under all the floors, which is madness, we could have a field which the floor panels react to. So if we have a single standalone gravity generator, Star Citizen style, a spinny ball of sorts, and for some reason I'm immediately picturing Event Horizon. So if you imagine the big spiky reactor in Event Horizon, we could have something like that that's generating the field, and then the plating in the floors reacts to that field and creates the gravity. So if you turn the big spiky spinny ball off, then the floor plates are no longer reacting to that field and are no longer generating gravity. That would avoid needing to route crazy voltage through floor plates. Okay, I'll have a look. Yeah, the gravity generating hardware is not something we've really gone into in any great detail, but I like the idea of making it centralized and having a central gravity generator. So you have a room with a thing in it that you can turn off and do maintenance on, and if you turn it off, then gravity slowly fades from the ship. Yeah, and I like the idea of the floor plating containing some kind of thing which reacts to that field, creating gravity in a monopole fashion, until you install the floor plate upside down and it sucks you down when you stand on it. That could be quite funny. It's like, Steve, you've done it again! Yeah, I like that idea actually. which means that a damaged floor panel need not necessarily become something which is deadly, because if the floor plating contains tremendous amounts of voltage, then that's just crazy if that breaks. Whereas if it's a material which reacts to a field, then it doesn't matter if it's broken, it will still even work to some extent, just not as well. So we could have a variable amount of gravity depending on the health of the floor panels. So the more and more damage they get, the less and less gravity they're providing, which could be an interesting mechanic. Yeah, damn you, Steve. Yeah, it would have to be monopole, Zalaf. So it would have to be the case that the magic material that we make the floors out of, when exposed to the gravity field, they start sucking downward. So they I don't know, whatever reaction they have with the field causes gravity. And then that will, I guess the thickness of the material defines how far that extends. So if it was like paper thin, you'd have a very small amount of gravity, like it might extend a few centimeters. Whereas if you've got like an inch thick amount of the material, then that extends all the way to the ceiling. So we need to judge it so that the thickness of the material is sufficient to provide the gravity we need to fill the room space that we have. Yeah, the nice thing about doing that, actually, because it also solves the steps problem. Because yeah, one of the things that I was struggling with the whole gravity side of things is, what about staircases? Obviously, the staircases have quite thin wooden steps, so like, where's the gravity coming from as you're walking up the stairs? But if we have this magic material on everything that you step on, then that solves that problem. So we'd have like a layer of the gravity material inside each step. So as long as the field's active, the steps will be keeping you in place. Which means that our floor cavities that we have here can be just reserved for utilities, rather than having to actually fit in the gravity net, which would be a huge job. So let us cap that off. Am I even on the right layer? Yes, I am. Actually, I wanted to do that the other way, didn't I? Yeah, I'm sure the lift could have something to do with that. I think the bigger issue there is that if the amount of gravity that's being generated is relative to the thickness of the material, then you wouldn't be able to change that. That couldn't be a variable. did that cable go? There it is. Yeah, so we'll have to have panels that go over that, and then we'll take some cable runs from the consoles, run them into there, and then the holo display can also power from there. That works, and it gives us things we can pull up. Yeah, I'll do the same on the Magellan as well, where for some things we'll need to route that power through the floor, and yeah, we'll have the floor panels removable to get to that stuff. Yeah, I guess the point with having a passive material is that it wouldn't... It's not something you can turn on and off because it's always there. So it's literally just a passive thing which reacts to the field. So the only way to stop it reacting to the field would be to remove it. And I guess in terms of the strength of the gravity, I guess you control that by the field strength. So it doesn't matter how many of those things you stack up on top of each other. All you're doing is just extending the distance in which the gravity has an effect. It's the field generator which is controlling how strong the force is. Ah, we can do it in UE. That shouldn't be a problem. Oh, spelled it wrong. How very me. Yes, yeah, we'll have localized gravity, because the idea overall is that each segment of the ship is an isolated thing. So, like down here. So that floor, those panels, and that ceiling, that comprises one segment. So this segment will have a cube that you can't see. And within that cube, we will have air pressure, air quality, air temperature, gravity strength, and whatever else we want to put there. So like, is there poison in the air? Is there some kind of pathogen in the air? And all of that will be contained within the invisible cube that's in here. The cube is basically like a gravity field as well, so it'll be applying a constant force downward to the actors that are within that field. So as you're walking down, you're constantly receiving force from this. The player character will be essentially a floating pawn, so it's not going to be the usual character class that walks around. The floating pawn means that it can float at any angle, including upside down if need be. So that floating pawn is able to be driven by different gravity strengths. So by default, it'll have a gravity strength of 0. So unless it's in one of these fields, it won't have gravity by default. So if you exit the ship, all of a sudden you are floating. So because we have these isolated cubes that are having an effect on the player and anything else, we can control gravity throughout the vessel on a per segment basis. So if these particular floor pieces get damaged or completely destroyed, then just in this space you will have a limited amount of gravity. There will be overlap from opposing panels, but if you had like 3 out in a row, and if you were stood in the middle, you'd practically be in 0G. So you could be running down a corridor with gravity, jump, and then float the rest of the way if those panels weren't there, which could be kind of cool. That's the plan anyway. That's how I'm planning to manage it. And things like air pressure and anything else we need to model aboard the ship, we will have these cubes communicate with the adjacent cubes. So if this one suddenly shows 0 air pressure, then it will speak to the ones on the opposite side and they'll balance out. And then that balancing act will just keep continuing until we get to something like this. If the door's open and the field's off, then obviously the cube that's here will show vacuum. The vacuum cannot balance out with air pressure here, so the air pressure here will then go to 0, and so on and so on, because all the air pressure is being lost through this cube that's in the doorway. Thus, vacuum will spread throughout the entire ship, along with fire spread, pathogens, and anything else. So it's just constantly communicating cubes, basically, which is why we needed to segment all of this in the first place, so that if this cube is registering that it's on fire, then the one next to it will then become on fire after a certain random dice roll, and so on, all the way down the corridor. So if you leave that unattended, then eventually the whole ship will be on fire, because each cube is communicating to the one next to it. Yeah, right now the character pawn is using ALS, and because of that, the animation system needs certain things. So turning that into a floating pawn won't work. But we're moving it across to metahumans, and I'll be building that system from scratch with the help of contractors. So we'll bring in a contractor to build the animation system for that, because obviously if the pawn is upside down because of gravity, we still need foot locking to work on ceilings, and we still need the animation system to work properly regardless of which way up the character is. So right now it's like it's firing a line trace downward to work out where the floor is, to be able to do the foot locking on the floor. So we need that to work at whatever angle the pawn is at. So at that point, if gravity on the ship is inverted, then you could genuinely walk on ceilings. which is where we want to get to. We need the ability for the character pawn to properly walk around with full animations and like motion matching and stuff, regardless of which way up it is. So we could do like a spinning habitat with rotational gravity. So we could easily model that using these gravity fields, because we just have a ring of gravity fields around the circumference of the circular colony, for example, and then you'd be able to walk around the circular gravity generator, which would be very cool. It'll be purely event-driven, Zalaf. So it won't be ticking like at 60 FPS. We'll probably have the updates happen once per second. So like once per second, each of the cubes will be doing a state check. So they'll be speaking to each other, but they're only speaking to their neighbors. So this cube here has no knowledge of what's going on down here. But they will be passing messages back and forth, again on a really slow tick rate. It doesn't need to update quickly. So like if you were to open the shuttle bay doors and open the ship up to vacuum, it wouldn't be immediately vacuum all the way through the ship. That vacuum would spread slowly, cube by cube, probably once per second. So it would probably take 30 seconds or so before this one registers it's at vacuum. So that vacuum is going to spread. And the same thing with like fire spread. So we don't need that fire to spread quickly. We can just be doing a really slow tick rate and just have it update slowly. And once that's running on C++, we can run it on a background thread anyway. So yeah, it shouldn't be too much of a heavy system. And to be honest, we don't even need them to tick, because if it's event driven, then we can just pass messages down the chain in an event driven way. So the update of one triggers the update of the next one, which triggers the update of the next one, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah, when it comes to swimming through the air, we'll just add impulse to the pawn. The same way that we're moving the Caravella now. So we are obviously using physical thrusters to move it. So we do something like that. Obviously 0G gameplay is probably the last thing we'll be doing, because that's like the least relevant for general gameplay. But the character system that we build at least needs to be capable of it. Obviously there's going to be lots of places in the game that don't have gravity. And we want meaningful EVAs, and we want to be able to exit a ship and be able to EVA over to another one and that sort of thing. So it's yeah, it is something that absolutely needs developing. So that should be power in. And power out. I just like stick that there for now. So we want to see in the world that is flashing to denote that it has power. Not that they should ever be flashing. They should only flash, and they should only actually flash if they're broken. So I need to fix that. Yeah, and what we'll do, if we set that up to use power. So what is it now? So it's just a static mesh, isn't it? So what can we borrow? I guess we'll borrow the cable. Exactly, Anasi, yeah. And like when you start up the ship with cold and dark, we want the cold and dark startup to largely be floating around to begin with until the gravity generator comes online, in which case that's going to be one of the first things you do. So before you even start the reactor, you'll be starting up the gravity generator using the startup capacitors. Get that running first, then you will have gravity, and then you can do the rest of the cold and dark startup. So that has to be a thing at some point. Yeah, or magnetic boots, but I like the idea of floating around the ship and then, you know, restoring gravity. I think that would be quite a lot of fun. I'm going to make like a fake hollow display a minute so that we can test out the power. Let's call it fake hollow display. So we need a simple sphere. Let's move that up a bit. We need our interface for electrical, so BPI electrical system that allows us to actually receive power. So voltage delivery, so that's basically electricity coming in. And we also need our power connector. To do our overlap check. So at some point this one will need to find its connected cable because it needs to be able to tell it how much wattage it's using. Unless this device reports back and says I'm using this much wattage, then the box down at the end doesn't know what the amperage is overall. So we need to make sure that all the devices report that. So every time they receive a voltage delivery tick, they'll go, oh yeah, my wattage is this. But very simply, if it's greater than 0, in fact we don't even need a branch there because we can just set visibility. And then we can drive that straight from there. So if greater than 0 is true, then it is visible, otherwise it is not. And then we'll just borrow whatever material that is. So what's that? So that's 2.7. Okay. Right, there's our lovely hollow earth. Okay, and then the connector needs to be, I think it's the 5cm one. 5cm connector, this will be the male one, I think. Yeah, so the female one is the one that sends the voltage, so that you're not getting your fingers stuck on the burny bits. that plugged into there. Right, so that should be set to just block all. Static and static. Just make sure that it's set to world static. Yep. Looks about right. Okay, so if we set that to be invisible by default, then that should not turn on unless we're getting voltage here. So this is set with 1 enabled, so that's enabled and plugged in. So assuming everything lines up, that should light up the holo display. Okay, so no voltage to that cable. So no voltage coming out the box. Let's just fix this one over here a minute. Didn't have that enabled. Okay, so both of them now have power, and so it should be powering this cable. But why is it not? Okay, so the other boxes are all definitely working. Okay, gonna have to debug this now. Typically. I suppose the first thing we need to do is let's make sure that it is actually finding its downstream cable. You know what? I'm going to make this into a macro because I'm doing this so often lately. I'll keep having to make it every single time. So let's go ahead and just make ourselves a macro. And just call it debug text. I already made one apparently. Or is that just not here? Alright, debug spam. Right, so we want input, so execute. Then, so we're going to want our boolean. So to begin with, that can just go straight into there. If we are showing our debug, we're going to print string. So we want a string, which is our debug text. We want our color, text, color, spelled the correct way. And I suppose we'll stick a duration on there because why not? Should make life a little bit easier, so then we just go, actually keep that variable there. So cable found, green, all the lines. There we go. So first things first, we need to know that it's actually finding its cable. Okay, more than one box has debug turned on. That does not help. We invented English. I'm claiming the high ground. So it's not that one. Yeah, that one. That one. I think that's the only ones we've got, isn't it? Well, I saw 3 greens, so I'm assuming then that that one is still good. Yeah, it sounds like a bit of a cop-out answer, but yeah, it's true. It's when it's ready is the correct answer, but there's not a lot left to do now. I need to implement the wrist button in VR so that we get the pause menu come up, because at the moment you can't change the graphic settings from within VR, which is a pain. You can't exit the game from within VR, which is also a pain. So just need to do that. I'm practically done with the bridge consoles that needed upgrading, so they're done. What else was it? There was 3 things that I had to do. Can't remember the third thing. Oh, the ability to like command NPCs in VR. Yeah, so that. So wrist menu for the pause menu and the settings and all that. The ability to command an NPC in some way in VR. I'll probably just do like a pointy laser thing. So you point a laser at them and it brings up a menu. For now, as a temporary solution. And just bug fix, basically. Get all the bugs done. All the blockers are now fixed. So technically, we don't have any bugs that are preventing the demo going out. It's now more of a polish thing. So obviously we want it to be as polished as possible before putting it out. So do the wrist menu, which might even be an hour's work. Do the pointy laser thing for NPCs, and do the bug polish. Basically, that's it. So imminently, I guess, is the answer. Do you mean for the game, Delta? Because I plugged mine in earlier. Hang on a minute. Just so happens I have one in my hand. So what I did... And of course it's updating. Yeah, I think if you just press the game menu, then you can add per game control settings. Don't know why my brightness is on 0. That's weird. I think the game needs to be running in order for that to work. Didn't realize it ran on Proton. That's really funny. Yeah, so the frustrating thing with all this like electrical stuff and setting it all up is that we know that this box here works fine because it's providing power to the batteries. Now all I did was copy paste it, and as much as it's receiving power, something's not right. So I'm assuming those overlaps are working properly, but we will double check. Yeah, so I guess that is working. So the next thing we need to check is the voltage delivery. And we just need to, oops, no, we don't want that. So is it actually receiving voltage? And the fact that the UI is not turning on might suggest that it isn't. Yeah, okay, so it's not receiving voltage. But why not? Because we know those cables are receiving voltage because they are green. And we know that the box itself is working because this is a copy of one that is working happily. So what have I done to prevent it working? Right, so it's definitely, they're definitely on. Disconnect that for now to stop the error coming up. So that's definitely plugged in. You don't need to worry about IDs anymore. Unplug that one. Okay. Hang on, just doing the Steam Deck thing. Yeah, so if we play using DX12, yeah, so it comes up with using recommended template layout, blah blah blah. Oh, whoops. I've just realised it's signed into my daughter's account and I've just kicked her off whatever game she was playing. Sorry. Yeah, so like once you're on the main menu, if you go into the Steam settings, it comes up with controller settings, and then if you go to there, you had to set it up for like keyboard and mouse emulation. Can't remember how I did it now. Oh yeah, so trackpads as joystick, and I think I set click as mouse click. That's it, yeah. So when you do your control mappings, if you set them up for like mouse click, then the game will treat that as a mouse in the game. Just checking that it actually works, because we had someone saying it didn't. It's working, hurrah! It's weird to see it running on a Steam Deck. Like, I'm amazed that the Steam Deck has just the power to run the game, because it's not exactly a lightweight game to run. So yeah, having the Steam Deck able to load it is just crazy. Although I don't know what the graphics are actually set to. I bet there's something crazy. Yeah, getting like 2 FPS. I think Lumen's turned on. That won't help. So that's that question. Can it handle the ship with Lumen on? No. But it does run, so that's good. No, like, resolution-wise, it seems perfect. Like, it's perfectly playable. It's just, yeah, graphically, make sure you turn Lumen off, because that absolutely kills it. Okay, so we're not getting voltage delivery. Is that because I'm not finding the cable cables. So yeah, upstream cable there. So found upstream cable A. Found upstream cable B. Let's make sure that it's actually finding both of those. And if that is reporting true, then it must be something to do with the cable. Ah, interesting. So it's only finding cable A. But why? Now, let's replace some of this gubbins with this handy macro instead. More compact. Speed that up a bit. So we want interface B. Oh, I guess that's the physical one, isn't it? Interface B in. No, you'd need a separate user account. So, yeah, you need a second account on Steam because it wouldn't let you run the game twice. Oh, that's interesting. Why are they now not on at all? Oh, is it? Hang on a minute. Let's turn off the random fault thing on these cables because that's not going to help, is it? Having them randomly die on us. Just turn that off for a minute. And they should never break. Aha, there we go. Okay, so we've got voltage to there. Holo display's not coming on, but that now is. So we disconnect that, and that should be off, which it is. And back on. It's back on again. Right, so the final piece of the puzzle then is getting the holo display to turn on. Why is it not? So again, it shouldn't need to load up cable connectivity, because all it's doing is just waiting for that to come through. So I guess we'll do a debug. So debug spam. It's only one of them, so I'll just tick it as true. And yeah, we'll just give it the amount of voltage. Let's see, do we get anything? No, the Caravella should be flyable reasonably soon, to be honest. Although I am wondering why that's ticking so much. The voltage delivery should be once per second, not, shouldn't be being spammed like that. So that's coming from cables. Now we know that the cables are 100% event driven, so it won't be them. It's going to be either these boxes or the batteries. Assuming the batteries. Yeah, so if we turn debug on for this one, let me turn debug off for this one. The more we roll this out, the less we're going to have issues. It's just these initial teething problems while we set it all up. Yeah, so that box is receiving voltage from the batteries at a ridiculous rate. I wonder if that's because each battery segment is all updating at once, maybe? Hang on, let's have a look. Right, so manage output bus should technically be going once per second. Am I in fact not doing that? Yeah, so battery management tick is once per second. So that's just doing that once. Then manage output bus. So we should only see 4 orange bits of text, 1 for each battery array. They should not be spamming voltage like crazy. Okay, so the batteries are doing something mental that they shouldn't be doing. Okay, so if we take that back to here, maybe. I wonder whether that's being called somewhere else. Yeah, so that's what we should see. We should see each battery array updating once per second, which is what we've got there. So we know that this is only running once per second, as it should do. So where else is this being loaded from? So that one we know about, that's that one there. That only happens once. I wonder if something's doing that. Okay, right, so that's what's happening. Something is setting that variable. Interface 1 load. So something which must be upstream is sending that. So what is the question? Wattage? Wattage is the question. Definitely where it's coming from. Okay, so the only way that could be firing as if one of these cables is sending it. So if we show debug on this cable, yeah, so the wattage report would be coming from the next device up the line. So if this cable is receiving spam from somewhere, then it's going to be because probably the reactor, but I shall have a look. Let's see. Yeah, it's basically on tick. And lots of these cables have debug turned on, which is not helpful. so that's it managing the wattage reports. So that manage internal bus should be ticking again once per second. Or is it being set up? No, that's the error tick. So it does it once when the game loads. That's a one-time event when the cables are turned on and off. Load reports. Okay. So it must be the reactor. Let's just show the debug on this cable and see if that's getting anything. Help if I gave it a color. Right, okay, so that's what we'd expect to see. The reactor is pulsing once per second, which is normal. So that being the case, why, or rather where, does it start to go weird? So if that one's all right, then what about that one? So that's the one that's feeding the battery array. So if that is spamming, then it must be something to do with this box. We will track it down. Okay, so it's not that one. Okay, yeah, it's not that one. test them both at once, save a bit of time. I'm wondering whether some things like cross-wired, so it's looping in on itself. Okay, so they're all right. And yet they weren't all right just now. Confused. Has the problem just magically fixed itself? There we go. See, the interesting thing there is that the battery array was showing that it wasn't getting spammed. So that's voltage in. That's the wattage report. So again, wattage reports are coming from the end device backwards so that we can calculate amperage, and voltage is coming from the source downstream so that we can turn things on. Okay, so as far as the battery is concerned, it's fine. So we're not getting any craziness from here. Okay, so the battery, the output cable, which would be that one, let's see what that's doing. So we should see nothing on the wattage report. In fact, let's cable wattage report. Cable voltage delivery. Okay, so the cable is getting spammed. So what if we turn off that a minute? See whether it's only the wattage report which is breaking and not the voltage. Okay, yeah, so it's getting overwhelmed with that as well, which means given that this isn't showing any issues, let's just double check that. It's difficult to know where that's coming from. We've got basically something like a broadcast storm happening on the electrical network, because something somewhere is overloading it with signals. So if we go through these again, so we tested these cables and they were showing fine. Hang on, let's actually turn the debug on, that would help. Oh, and now they're not fine. So that's coming. Yeah, that's coming from the battery array. But then that one wouldn't be. So if we follow that all the way to there, I guess the issue is we're triggering the voltage delivery from the wattage report. Hang on, I'll make sure that they are not triggering one another. Yeah, so if we're getting the wattage report on there, then it should be all the way through the network. Lost the batteries. There. Let's make sure we've only got one thing doing a debug. Right, so this should be getting one voltage delivery per second. See you, Timmy. Have a good one. And hello, Madman. Okay, so we're getting voltage in. Oh, that's on the battery, I think. Yeah. Make sure we do one debug at a time. So that's good. So this cable is seeing 1 tick of voltage per second, exactly as we want it to. Good. Just gonna have to step through this. So we're seeing the voltage coming from the reactor once per second, and we're not being spammed by anything. So that's working fine. Okay. Okay, then we have this one. So this is the first cable going into the first battery. So turn debug off there. Turn it on there. Okay, so now we've got our single tick of voltage on that cable. I swear that's the one that was reporting weirdness. Turn the debug off there. Turn it on there. Just gonna go for it step by step by step. Good night, Mad Dementor. Have a good one. Right, so this one is receiving a bunch of spam. Okay. Right, now that will be from... That would be coming from this cable here. So, yeah, so that's getting hammered by the battery array. So that probably means then so are we... Yeah, so we're just passing that down the line. Just notice I've disconnected that actually. Let me just recheck it on that one. Right, so we're definitely good on that one. And then that's the one which is probably spamming both voltage and wattage. Yeah, so that's getting spammed with both. Okay. I think what's happening is something is triggering the other thing. So you've got like a bounce going on of a voltage report being followed by a wattage report, and then one's triggering the other. So you've kind of got this like infinite loop going on. So yeah, so that's, hang on, let's just double check the battery. So I think it's the battery that's causing the issue here. Yeah, so we're getting... So voltage in is ticking once per second, as it should do. So that's all groovy. But this one's getting spammed. Don't know, I'll double check in a sec. I'll leave those debugs on for a minute. So the actual tick that's going on here, it's fairly straightforward. What we're doing is we take our voltage, we work out how many batteries we have enabled that don't have full charge, and then we simply add to that value once per second. And conversely, we reduce charge per battery, again depending on our load. Nice and simple. We then use that information to manage our internal bus. Yeah, and then we're updating if something's changed. So if that wattage has changed, then we pass that back along the line, just to make sure that we're keeping everything updated. Okay, and then once per second, because this is ticking once per second, we are sending our voltage delivery. So let's just see how often that's actually happening, because if this is happening more than once per second, then something's triggering something. See. Okay, so yeah, so that battery is spamming out like what it shouldn't be. So something is triggering this or the whole thing. Not this, probably, most likely. I think we went through this merry-go-round already, didn't we? So interface 1 load set there. Right, yeah. Right, so that's what's happening. So we're getting wattage reports, which is triggering our output bus, which is sending our voltage delivery. And the reason the voltage is being spammed is because our output, the wattage on that is changing. So if we don't do that, because this is ticking once per second anyway, so because before we were checking to see whether or not the voltage had changed at all. We no longer care whether the voltage has changed because we're going to tick it anyway. So we don't need to wait for any kind of signal. Okay. That might be our loop. Okay, so we're definitely sending now once per second, which is what we want. So the next question is why is our wattage report being spammed? And where is it being spammed from? Let's make sure we turn off all the debug there. Right, so this cable at the very end of the line shouldn't be receiving a wattage report from the holo display because it's not capable of it. Interesting, so it's getting hammered with voltage. Which it should stop doing. Interesting. Okay, so if we just follow our chain a minute on here, so if we skip the wear management side of things, and we will not worry about the damage stuff for now. So we're not using any of that at the moment, so it can just be ignored for a moment. Right. What's that doing? Okay, so we're just managing our lights and we're doing a UI report. That shouldn't be doing anything other than updating the UI on the connected boxes. Let's just double check though, because you never know, something might be slipping through. Okay, yeah, so comes through. Yeah, and all that's doing is updating the UI, so we don't need to care about that. It's not causing any harm. Right, so the wattage report there because that should always be 0. So all of these cables are basically, in fact we'll even skip that. We're no longer working on the principle of there being a magic cable that lots of things can plug into, because we're plugging things in physically. So to be honest, that's not needed. But blah blah blah. Yeah, we're not actually doing anything with wattages there. I just want to make sure it's not the cable that's causing the problem. So yeah, that's just doing the UI reports. Because the voltage is doing the same. Yeah, UI report and lights. Stop that from flashing. Don't want any flashing on that one. Okay. And then all we're doing here is that. That's redundant. Okay, so that whole wattage report thing should only be triggered by something upstream sending it, which means it must be the distributor. And I'm guessing what's happening here is it doesn't know which interface the voltage is coming in on. As much as we've got two plugs, A and B, it doesn't know which of those was detected, because we're sending just a generic voltage delivery to this box, but we don't know what port we're plugged into. This is kind of like a chicken and egg problem that we need to solve. When we were using manually specified endpoints, so we're actually telling the cable which interface are you plugged into, we can pass that information along so that when we actually look at the box itself, here we can do a switch on whichever interface the voltage came in on and then set that accordingly. Now it shouldn't matter too much. It shouldn't matter because we're just sending it on A twice, I think, if it's defaulting to A. Pretty sure it defaults to A. Or none at all. See, that's interesting because technically it shouldn't work at all, because if we're not sending, unless it's defaulted on the cable, of course. Oh, it is, yeah. I was going to say, if we're sending nothing in the string, it shouldn't work at all. But no, we are sending interface A by default, which means as far as this box is concerned, both of those cables are plugged into the same port. Similarly, when it sends reports out, it's going to be sending them both down the same cable. So I'm just wondering if we stop it from doing that. Because it should not be receiving anything here. Which I shall just confirm. Oh, GPU just went mad. So this box in particular should not be receiving any wattage reports, because the only thing downstream of this box is that cable, and the holo display is not capable of sending it anything. So yeah, let's just make sure that none of those are debugging. So that should be the only thing showing any debug. Yeah, so it's just getting a whole load of voltage. So if we stop that from being able to send a wattage report, let me follow that through, blah 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 blah. There. So we'll break the ability to send that. Just see whether or not that stops the crazy amounts of voltage coming through. Which it does. Okay. So you've got two cables sending 240 volts through as desired, which is nice. Okay, so it's definitely that wattage report spam which is causing the voltage report spam, which is basically causing some kind of a broadcast storm. So I'm going to have to pick through this basically device by device, making sure that everything is lined up properly and not triggering other things unnecessarily. But that's how it should look. So now it's working properly. Yeah, so the next thing to do is just get that holo display turned on, and that's mission accomplished. and the lights are no longer flashing. Yeah, they should only flash if there's a fault, in which case they'll be flashing red. But yeah, otherwise they should be a solid green if they're powered. Right, so I guess on the cable, just need to see whether or not I know exactly what the problem is. It's because we didn't add it to our list of valid things that we can overlap. I'm going to have to find some better way of doing this. Fake hollow display. Huzzah! We have power. So if we turn off that, power has been removed. Turn it back on. Power is restored. Huzzah! Okay, so now that we've got that, we can start deleting these like fake boxes here that are providing fake power, and actually start hooking things up to the actual reactor. Obviously, these boxes all need resizing and cleaning up and sorting out, but ultimately, as long as we can get the connectivity working, then we can make the ship flyable. Because right now, I'm not sure actually that we can. Just out of interest. Yeah, so the sensors are working, the helm is not, so that's just something that we're going to have to fix. But we're getting there. It's almost flyable. So the holo display, once I swap that out with the real one, will connect to this, so the sensors and the holo display will be working, and then we just need to hook up the helm, and at that point it can at least be like flown around. Not that it's got any kind of an interior, but still. What we will do with this ship is we will give it its own unique UI style, and I want to do this using meshes rather than a widget panel. So I'm going to try and make it a fully physicalized mesh driven UI, and we'll see how that works, because it means I'm going to have to use things like text render components in order to do the text on the screen, and we might run into issues with things like this, where we have like a bazillion things in the list, which is fine using list items, because you've got 1800 items, and it's only ever rendering this many at a time. So unless I can like recreate that behavior in a mesh-based system, we'll have to see. But if I can make the UI mesh-based rather than widget-based, it means that we can like lay out all the UIs in SketchUp, actually build them with any design and style that we want, make them any shape we want, so we could have complex curved UIs without having to worry about the limitations with widgets. You can bend them round, but only in one direction, and you can't like skew them in any way. But yeah, we'll see if that works or not. But yeah, I think we shall call it a night there. We have power to the bridge. Oh, hey Hubris, and I'm afraid you've timed it really badly because the stream is about to end. So I shall wish you all a happy week ahead, and I shall see you on Wednesday for some Magellan class fun. Let's see, by Wednesday I should have the bridge stuff polished already, so might work on some more like task-based stuff on Wednesday. Maybe get some NPCs doing stuff on the ship. I like the idea of having them moving cargo between all the different storage rooms on the science deck. So it's quite a good objective actually for Wednesday. If we can get them at least moving cargo around, then we can demonstrate, NPCs picking stuff up, carrying them about, and putting them somewhere else. So yeah, we'll have a go at that. Right, on that happy note, have a good week, and I shall see you on Wednesday. Bye for now. Except my OBS window has gone mad. When my GPU had a flake out earlier, it's put like black squares on top of everything. Oh, no, there we go. It's refreshed. All right, see you everyone.